Trump be insane mass murderer Trump at the debate tonight, or merely strategic mass murderer Trump at the debate tonight? Because the debate tonight transpires against the backdrop of what should have been the lead story everywhere yesterday and today, the Rolling Stone effing kill them all story. But 9 years into this, our political media still can't process it, still thinks, institutionally and individually, that in a reversal of the famous H-L Mencken quote, if they pretend it isn't true often enough, it'll stop being true, they still believe that no one could have become president of the United States or try to stay in office extra-constitutionally or eventually become so insane and so damaged that he would openly boast that not only will he imprison in concentration camps millions of immigrants and others he intends to deport, but that, quote, getting them out will be a bloody story. And that he said that on Saturday only because the self-protective animal-cunning filter that used to stop him from saying the Hitlerian mass murder bloody story part out loud, that is now breaking or broken, and there is a chance, however small, that it could break a little more tonight, and he could make it worse tonight. And if Kamala Harris has the courage to push this particular button tonight, she could not only win the debate and win the election, but destroy Trump once and for all, and maybe, just maybe even present a scenario in which Joe Biden only becomes the candidate who dropped out the second closest to the election. Quote, effing kill them all. Rolling Stone quotes its multiple sources from the Trump administration and the Trump inner circle, quoting Trump himself about cartels and gangs. In other words, Latinos. Because to Trump, virtually all Latinos are drug kingpin gang lord rapists. That is the founding image of his political career from 2015. Quoting Trump again, and Rolling Stone sources place him sitting at the Resolute desk as he said this, slamming his fist onto the Resolute desk, presumably not making a sound against the Resolute desk because his fists are so freakishly small. Quote, an eye for an eye. You just got to kill these people. Other countries do it all the time. They need to be eradicated, not jailed, unquote. And that's just actually the tip of the blood-red iceberg. Rolling Stone's Tim Dickinson and Swin Subsang fill in the hues. Quoting them, Trump wanted to see their bodies piled up in the streets. Specifically, he sought a series of mass executions with firing squads and gallows, and certainly without the quaintness of an appeals process, to send a chilling message about the scope of his power. They continue that he, quote, brought up the topic so often during the early years of his presidency that one former White House official tells Rolling Stone they lost count. Madam Vice President, I don't want to tell you your job here, but if you can get Trump to act like that tonight, you probably should. Because as I read those quotes, none of that sounded wrong to you, did it? None of that sounded inconsistent with what he's done and said again, and said a third time, and a 30th time, and a 300th time, and finally Saturday, he drove over his internal stop sign and knocked down the mental picture most of his partially sane supporters still have of a group of criminals, maybe actual gang members, actual violent offenders, actual drug dealers, their hands chained behind their backs, walking slowly out of the country across the southern border as Uncle Sam salutes or something. He knocked down that picture and replaced it with piles of the executed bodies stacked like cordwood, some of them criminals, maybe, some of them their lawyers, some of them their children, some of them citizens, some of them people who just don't get out of the way fast enough for the tastes of the Trump brown shirts. Drop that mental picture at the end of one of your answers, Madam Vice President, because the hidden headline of the Trump-Biden debate was that as crazy and deceitful as nearly everything Trump said during that one was, he didn't act or look particularly crazy. This would be particularly crazy. Or who knows? Maybe the moderators will ask Trump about it. I know. David Muir is the Lester Holt of Dana Bashes. But if he asks Trump a question about this, and Trump explains that his troops are going to kill a lot of people, and he gets worked up about it, and he starts talking anywhere near the way he talks in the Rolling Stone piece, that's not only something the public, remember the public, David Muir? That's not only something the public should hear, that's a career maker. That's a statue maker. You want to be Edward R. Murrow, David Muir? David R. Murrow? Ask the effing question. Or play the clip. I mean, to bring up dictator for a day, or immunizing the cops, or using troops against U.S. citizens, or the already gathering plot to give him a third term or a fourth term, that has a certain, we knew that, quality to it. Even to bring up Trump's post from Saturday about arresting and prosecuting political opponents is him writing stuff, not him talking stuff. He can wriggle easily out of writing stuff. It's his art form. But when they throw out the first question at the debate, the bloody story soundbite will only be 3 days old. It is from his most recent public appearance before the debate. You don't have to interpret anything, David Muir. You don't have to add an opinion. You don't have to extrapolate or analyze or imply or infer. You just say, former President Trump, Saturday in Wisconsin, you said something about mass deportations of undocumented immigrants, and you described it as a, quote, bloody story, that it will be a bloody story. What did you mean by that? And in case you've forgotten what you said, here's the tape of you saying it, former President Trump.
In Colorado, they're so brazen, they're taking over sections of the state. And, getting them out will be a bloody story. Should have never been allowed to come into our country. Nobody checked them. Nobody checked. Were they criminals? Were they from jails? We have them pouring out from jails. We have the worst criminals in all of these countries. 168 so far are registered, 168 countries. They're in our country, and they said, if you come back, you will be executed. You will be killed immediately. Not going to be easy, but we'll do it.
Then, David Muir, you just say, do you expect thousands of them to be bloodied, sir? Tens of thousands? Hundreds of thousands? 1 million? Or if you don't have the balls to make yourself into a journalistic immortal, David Muir, just ask, what do you mean by a bloody story? Or you could bring it up, Vice President Harris. I meant what I said. If the cards fall correctly, Trump could talk himself out of the race on this one topic. You don't think so? Yeah. Why again isn't President Biden at the debate tonight? Tim O'Brien, the Bloomberg editor who wrote nearly 20 years ago that Trump was only worth $250 million and Trump sued him and Trump got blown out of court, had 7 pieces of advice for Kamala Harris tonight, and I thought they were damn good. The first was respect the split screen. Oh, superb point. The vice president used to have something of a public speaking issue, which I think she has mastered wonderfully. But she's always had a great face for television. Men have them, women have them. It's a TV thing, not a gender thing. Are you expressive, lively, optimistic, welcoming, or if need be, does it look like you could kill people with x-rays coming out of your eyes? Do you have resting president face? Keep it on at all times. The camera is on you at all times. I used to write this occasionally on my scripts on TV if I was going to be on for a long time. You never know when the camera's going to be on. You assume it's on you all the time. O'Brien also points out you can dodge any question, but you can't dodge all the questions. Cooperate on some. You have personal advantages on Trump. Use them. Abortion rights. He's a criminal. You're a prosecutor. You were not border czar, but you were tasked with the border, and he tanked the border deal. You're sane and he's crazy. Pivot to these. O'Brien does not say pander to the voters in the swing states, but I say pander to the voters in the swing states. The economy remains decisive there. Throw out the stats. What's happening now? How much his tariffs will cost the average Pennsylvanian? Trump's in it for Trump, O'Brien writes. Point out that if he doesn't win, he's going to jail. Point out that a judge in New York just bent justice so that he doesn't have to go to jail next week. O'Brien reminds her that the best defense is a good offense. He shrugs off being called a liar or lawless. Trump loses his mind, however, if you call him weird or a failure or low energy or old. Go for the old. Old is gold. And lastly, he notes that Harris should be confident and of good cheer because the Trump debate prep team included J.D. Vance, Matt Gaetz, and Tulsi Gabbard. And if that would not make anybody confident in this situation, what possibly could? I would add that apparently he's also bringing Governor Kristi Noem to the debate. And of course, he bribed RFK Jr. to endorse him. So apparently, on top of everything else, 24 hours before they take to the stage, Trump has hit maximum stupidity. His right-wing echo chamber was clearly instructed yesterday to sell, as hard as they have sold anything else ever, that there's a screenshot of a supposed Facebook post out of Springfield, Ohio, in which the alleged poster's neighbor's daughter's friend had discovered cat-eating immigrants. Now, this is actually dumber than Trump thinking that political asylum means all the immigrants were in mental institutions. But if you're going to commit to the bit, you commit to the bit. You do not do what Trump then did. If you really think you can sell the idea of Kamala Harris Democrats enabling cat eating, you do not then bring Kristi Noem to the debate to remind everybody that she shot her daughter's puppy in the face and posted about it in her own book. And you do not bring J.D. Vance and his obsession with childless cat ladies. And you do not team up with RFK Jr. and his dead bear cub and the dog he may have eaten. So, Madam Vice President, be of good cheer. And remember the last one. Go for the old. Old is gold. Couple of last debate notes. See you live afterwards. From the defrocked, demoted, and detained by police, former White House physician, now one of Trump's flying monkeys, as Texas congressman who's chairman of the House Subcommittee on, says here, on swearing at peace officers at rodeos? Is that possible? I might have typed it wrong. Quote, tomorrow night, writes Ronnie Jackson, President Trump gets to put Kamala Harris in her place on live TV. Put Kamala Harris in her place, you say. As Trump has proven, the 70s, 80s, 90s, the aughts, first half of the teens were a time of widespread pretending by racists that they weren't racist and pretending by misogynists that they weren't misogynist. We were naive to think that these curses on America's society had been controlled or rolled back in some way, but it sure was nicer to live with that delusion. And with people like Ronnie Jackson at least trying to hide their racism and misogyny, put her in her place is the language of the Old South. And no matter what else happens tonight, there is joy in the thought that the racist, sexist snake that Jackson worships, Trump, will actually be pained by having to share a stage with her. And that's if she doesn't end his political career and force him into retirement. Well, prison. And on a lighter debate note, it was Saturday morning when the New York Times A-team of the best political reporters in the country who don't understand a damn thing about politics, Jonathan Swan and Maggie Haberman, wrote Times Standard Issue piece number 37, Ponderous Behind the Curtain, Our Sources Know Everything, Thumbsucker. It was about the Harris and Trump debate preps, and it began, quote, Harris is holed up for 5 days in a Pittsburgh hotel doing highly choreographed debate practice sessions ahead of Tuesday night's clash. There's a stage and replica TV lighting and an advisor in full Lee Strasberg method acting mode, not just playing Donald J. Trump, but inhabiting him, wearing a boxy suit and a long tie. Lee Strasberg. Nice up-to-date reference there, Jonathan and Maggie. We all loved Lee Strasberg in Godfather Part 2 playing Hyman Roth. Well, it turns out not everybody knows their film history, and our cultural guardrails are not only continuing to fail us, but continuing to fail us in new and innovative ways, and by ours I mean humanities. The British tabloid The Telegraph published an even more impressive story about the Harris debate prep on Saturday night, and its U.S. editor Tony Diver and its U.S. correspondent David Millward boisterously quoted their own sources. Ms. Harris, meanwhile, is preparing for the debate with a stand-in Trump, Lee Strasberg, an acting teacher who has been wearing a wide-shouldered boxy suit and red tie. Lee Strasberg died in 1982. But according to The Telegraph, U.S. editor Tony Diver and U.S. correspondent David Millward, Lee Strasberg is back and badder than ever. 2 months shy of his 123rd birthday, he's up there helping out Kamala Harris by portraying Trump in debate prep. Now look, if Kamala Harris can pull that off, she damn well better be the next president. I'm just assuming here that the Telegraph's sources on that story were a couple of their writers reading the Times and not very carefully reading it. A reminder that I will be on YouTube live after the debate for as long as it takes. And then the podcast, not the usual format, but in the usual places for Wednesday morning. Because of that, there will not be a September 11th commemoration here, which I was going to say I regretted when it dawned on me I could include one today. And so I will. By accident, I became the 9/11 street reporter for a Los Angeles all-news radio station, the only one. I can tell you a lot about that day by recalling 23 years ago tomorrow. I can tell you a lot more by playing tapes of my reporting from that day and the 2 months afterwards. And I will do that after Worst Persons, and that's next. This is an all-new edition of Countdown.
This is Countdown with Keith Olbermann.
Still ahead of us on this all-new edition of Countdown. Someday we comforted ourselves by saying on 9/11, we will have to explain to people what it was like, just the way our parents had to explain to us why Pearl Harbor still made them cry. The somedays always arrive, and yet when they do, they are still kind of hard to believe. For 9/11, the somedays are here. Anniversary 23 looms. The tapes of my radio work from the streets of New York that day and the days thereafter ahead. First, there are still more new idiots to talk about, the daily roundup of the miscreants, morons, and Dunning-Kruger effect specimens who constitute today's worst persons in the world. The bronze, worst, good old David Zaslav, the head of Warner Bros. Discovery. Though I record these before you hear them, these are not live. I don't know if you knew that. So I would double check just to make sure he hasn't been fired yet by the time you hear this. In the 2 years since he and his fascist boss, Mr. Malone, took over CNN, Zaslav has hired Chris Licht to run CNN into the ground, and he not only did that wonderfully, but he managed to do it while making sure that everybody blamed Zaslav every day. Then he had to publicly fire Zaslav. Then he hired a new guy who hasn't done anything yet in a year and a half. Then Zaslav, became the focus of the SAG-AFTRA strike. Then Zaslav was booed while he was giving a commencement address at Boston University, and he didn't believe they were booing him. They were saying, "Sick boo earns, Zaz," or something, I guess. And Zaslav has driven his entire company into the ground, generating headlines like this one from barely 2 months ago in the LA Times. David Zaslav, Hollywood reformer or wrecking ball? So how could he possibly make this worse? Well, sir, Zaslav can always make it worse. Caught in a suite at the U.S. Tennis Open Finals, shown on TV, sitting next to Leon himself, Elon Musk, or as Trump calls him, Leon. I'm assuming they were comparing notes. Well, Leon, I managed to destroy the legacy Diamond News asset my company spent billions to buy, says Zaz. And Musk comes back with, well, I did that, but I also self-induced so much brain damage, I'm now linked to QAnon, Trump, and also my trucks and rockets blow up. Also in the shot with Musk, Zaz is wearing a baseball cap. He's wearing it backwards. And it's one of those cheap baseball caps with the crappy-looking plastic snapbacks, which are now seen on camera, so he looks like he's being prepped for a brain transfer scene in a cheap Hollywood mad scientist movie. And how could he be in that kind of scene? To get a brain transfer, you have to have a brain in the first place. The runners-up, worser, Senator Marsha Blackburn and the Washington Generals of bad sports pundits turn worse fascist political commentators, Clay Travis. Clay Travis is Will Cain without the good shave. This is a denouement to Russian Stoogegate, where the Department of Justice charged some Russian propagandists and asserted that the Tim Pools and Dave Rubins and Benny Johnsons of this world, although they didn't name them per se, were all working for the Kremlin for hundreds of thousands a month via this woman Lauren Chen and her company Tenet Media, themselves linked to Glenn Beck. Only they didn't know they were working for the Kremlin. These idiots with giant egos and no skills thought they were that good. They thought they were worth hundreds of thousands of dollars a month for 10,000 views. Anyway, guess who was on one of the last Tim Pool podcasts before Pool was revealed as, Timsky Poolsky? This is courtesy Anna Caudill. Timcast IRL number 1102. Tim Pool announces legal action against Harris campaign for defamation with Clay Travis. Tim, Hannah, Claire, and Libby, these are unusual names for Russians, are joined by Clay Travis to discuss Tim Pool announcing he will sue the Kamala Harris campaign for defamation, the Philadelphia Eagles denying an endorsement of Kamala Harris, blah, 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 Tim at Timcast, blah, 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 Clay Travis at Clay Travis on X. Well, at least, Clay, you must have gotten what, 10 grand to be on that show with Pool since he was making $100,000 a month? Right? Right? You didn't get any money? You do that for free? Oh, too bad, Clay Travis. As to Senator Blackburn's involvement in all this, well, according to the news outlet Nashville Scene, quote, Tennessee Republican leaders, including U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn and U.S. Rep. Andy Ogles, have regularly amplified talking points from Tenet's talking heads. Blackburn also appeared on several podcast episodes with Lauren Chen in 2021 and 2022. I assume they were talking about baubles and Christmas decorations, which was Marsha's good job when she used to do a good job. And they're just the brightest and bobbliest things. But the winner, the worst, my former friend Robert F. Kennedy Jr., 20 years ago now, called me up at MSNBC and told me I was his hero. Online, he has written, quote, "Liberals, take note." Let me do it in his voice. "Liberals, take note. If you support Kamala Harris," he writes, "you are now on the same side as Dick Cheney." Well, yes, we all are on the same side as Dick Cheney. We're the human beings, and everybody else has lost the ability to be a human being. But actually, it's simpler than that. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. supporters, take note. He now supports Trump. So if you support Robert F. Kennedy Jr., you are now on the same side as our proto-Hitler. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., today's worst person in the world. As I said earlier in this all-new edition, circumstances will turn the September 11th version of this podcast into all debate all the time. So to memorialize 9/11, I should do it here and now, and I will. I had been living in Los Angeles doing sports for Fox for 2.5 years. I moved back to New York, the place of my birth, in late June 2001. Idling with a fat monthly paycheck until an expected move to Atlanta to go run sports for CNN, which never happened because they shut the network down. I lived in a hotel and then a pretty nice sublet near Central Park with spectacular views, all of them facing uptown. I could see Yankee Stadium from my balcony. I was headed there the night of September 11th, 2001. Uptown views, only uptown views. And so when I awoke that morning, I saw nothing unusual. Azure blue, perfect skies, one of easily the 10 prettiest days I ever saw in my life. Streets were full of traffic, people, life. Given when I woke up and when it all happened, I must have just missed seeing the jet streaking so nightmarishly low over Manhattan. By the middle of the day, I was on the phone with one of my friends, the general manager of KFWB Radio in Los Angeles, which until 2009 would be one of 2 all-news radio stations there. My friend asked me, tentatively, quietly, if I would come on the air with his anchors to talk about what it felt to be a New Yorker in New York on September 11th. The LA audience knew me. I had worked on local news, on TV, and on radio there every day for nearly a decade. And I knew instantly this would be my therapy. If I was just going to sit there while this new world built itself around the horrors at the World Trade Center, it would have driven me crazy. So I not only went on the air with KFWB, I stayed on with them and also with the ABC radio network for nearly 2 months, several times a day. I think every day. Certainly at one point I know I did 39 days out of 40. Live and on tape. Walking through the city, taking the subways, swallowing my fear and my loss. And I had somebody on 3 of the planes and in each tower of the World Trade Center. And the way I got through it was to report on it.
We do not know what Eamon McEnany did a week ago this morning. Presumably, we will never know if he had the time to show the instincts and courage that he had in 1993. A week ago this morning, he was working, as he was working 8 years ago, for the securities firm Cantor Fitzgerald. It occupied half the office space in the top 10 floors of One World Trade. A friend of mine at Cornell University emailed me last night. The school has announced that Eamon McEnany is among the victims of the Trade Center disaster, that his life will be celebrated Friday in a town in Connecticut. He was one of Cornell University's greatest athletes. I did not know him well. We were in one class together. That was in 1976, and he made the critical play in the first sporting event I ever covered as a professional. It was not a good play. He fumbled a punt. That led to the only points of the game for the other team. 2 days later, not knowing he was standing behind me in that classroom, I made a joke about it. My other friends thought Eamon was going to punch my lights out. I did too. Instead, he merely walked past me and smiled. Don't worry, I won't drop the next one. It's a week, and some of us are only now learning who we lost and what heroes they were and how proud they make us feel and how heartbroken. A week. A week since the disaster means that tomorrow will be a week since the last rescue. The mayor said today there is not much realistic hope of another one. Tell that to the 2 excavation experts from Cleveland. I met them this morning, trudging up the West Side Highway. They were going to get their crane. Huge, portable, long reach. The way they told it, there is no reason not to change the focus at the Trade Center now. Take the gamble. Use this crane to clear not just the rubble at the perimeter, but the big stuff. The stuff in the middle. The big stuff that is at once most dangerous and most likely to have provided an air pocket. It is risky. It concedes no one is alive in what were presumed to have been the highest chance areas. And as one of the excavation men put it, it's like trying to play pickup sticks from the middle out. But it may be all they have left. They might find someone in there before it's too late. They might find Eamon McAnaney. They might find any one of the 5,400 Eamon McAnaneys. They might. This is Keith Olbermann. Company 40's captain, James J. Gormley, sent a note to the families and to the company's neighborhood. It is among the most beautiful things I have ever read in the English language. Amazing for its faith, amazing for its acknowledgement of reality, yet its determination to exhaust every possibility before its acceptance of that reality. No member from this House is listed as deceased, Captain Gormley writes. I consider the members listed missing as still operating at the scene. We have not been able to relieve them from duty. He continues, there are many thousands of civilians trapped with our comrades. They need our prayers. Their families need to be assured that we hold their lives as dear as our own brothers. Hopefully each of our brothers has taken charge of a small group of survivors and teaches, encourages, and provides significant hope to each group. Captain Gormley is not Pollyanna here. His last paragraph reads, tragedy may yet visit us. We will face it together. We are not giving up. Maintain your health. We have lots of work to do. Again, I ask you to please pray because hope remains. In the 10 seconds it took Captain Gormley's 2 hook and ladders to roar past me the other night, I thought of his extraordinary message, and I thought of the 4O's other trucks that took the same turn a week ago Tuesday and never came back. And I had to New York had to know that these guys were okay. They're not supermen. They're not immune to the pain. A good friend of one of them told me yesterday they don't know what to make of the sudden, unabashed waves of love coming to them from ordinary New Yorkers. The men still here to receive that love are dealing with survivor guilt, dealing with loss. And like the cops and the medics, they're also dealing with a new world in which the radio of a policeman posted on Canal Street can crackle with the stark message, body parts found on 14th floor of World Financial Center, and be responded to by the emotionless voice of a dispatcher repeating it word for word as if it were a phone number or a set of directions. A million things about the New York of this Thursday, the 20th of September, 2001, bear no resemblance whatsoever to the New York of Monday, the 10th of September. Most of the changes are brutal, painful, but at least one of them is so moving, so uplifting, so human, it's as if New Yorkers had all grown new hearts with which to care about each other. We now have to know that the men of Company 40 and all the other fire companies and all the police details and all the EMS vehicles, the men who rocket past us, the men going in, to quote my grandfather, to make sure we got out, are okay. And if that history, or if the continuity of life in this community, or support for the families of the lost rescuers were not reasons enough, consider the testimony of one policeman posted in front of the stock exchange on Monday when the smoke was still so thick that until he came within 5 feet of me, I couldn't tell whether or not he was wearing eyeglasses. He wanted to talk about the Mets' last-ditch stand in the pennant race. We did. I asked him why, and his eloquence was simple and convincing. Look at it this way, he said. It doesn't matter, not really, but no matter what happens today, no matter what else happens, tonight I can go home, and at 7 o'clock I can put my feet up and watch the Mets and pretend nothing has changed. And as New Yorkers can authorize themselves to enjoy all this, so too can they authorize themselves to enjoy the shared involvement with humanity, to begin to laugh even in this grimmest of times. On the field 3 hours before this game, its handler brought the bomb-sniffing dog down for her first sweep through the Mets dugout. A half a dozen television cameras swung violently to capture the scene, and then a moment of unspeakable drama. Her back to those cameras, she stopped. The bomb-sniffing dog had stopped. Of course she had. There was a puddle on the dugout floor. She was having a quick drink of water, a tiny break in all this. An apt metaphor indeed for what we are all doing here tonight at a baseball stadium. At Shea Stadium in New York, this is Keith Olbermann.
President Bush has been touring the damage in Manhattan and talking with rescue workers at the scene of the World Trade Center collapse. KFWB's Keith Olbermann has a live update from New York City.
Well, the president sees all this for the first time. For the now 4-day veterans of this grim work, it doesn't just continue, it almost becomes mundane. A voice more weary than shot scratches across a police radio blaring here onto Canal Street. Body parts found on the 14th floor of the World Financial Center. With the efficiency and dispassion of a bank teller, a woman dispatcher repeats the grim news. Body parts found on the 14th floor of the World Financial Center. Consider what this means. The World Financial Center was not one of the buildings hit or burned on Tuesday. It's a development and whatever horror that led up to it, so grisly, so improbable that on any other day it would have been the lead story somewhere. However, here, on day 4, it is just a detail. Live on Canal Street, Keith Olbermann, KFWB News 980.
And KFWB News Time 10:07. KFWB's Keith Olbermann in New York says the city of big shoulders continues to shudder.
More than 3 days later, and this is a different city. It's not just that one can stand at the intersection of Canal and Greenwich Streets and look downtown 10 blocks and see nothing but 2 buildings, framing the smoke still rising from where the 12 million square foot World Trade Center stood. It's what you see on the faces of New Yorkers, not their expressions, their gauze face masks. With a 12-hour soaking rain having ended, the number of those protecting themselves from the smoke-tinged air is down to perhaps 1 in 50. But yesterday, it might have been 1 in 10. And these masks may be with us for the duration. Construction workers told me they can already smell the decay of bodies, and that smell could move uptown. There is only one comparison: the masks we see in the chilling photos of the worldwide flu epidemic of 1919. In Lower Manhattan, Keith Olbermann, KFWB News 980.
Wasn't exactly the tour the president got, but KFWB's Keith Olbermann also got to look at the disaster scene, and he joins us now live from Manhattan.
And walking through the neighborhood, Dan, immediately south of the barricades at Canal Street is remarkably like getting the insider's look at Burbank or Fox or any other Southland film studio. One block of Washington Street features untouched small apartment buildings with not a soul to be seen or heard around them. Turn a corner, and parked by every manhole is a phone company or electricity company truck. Make another right, and you do a double take. There are 19, count them, 19 Caterpillar bulldozers in the middle of a residential street waiting to be called upon. And finally, as far as your escorts will let you go, still 6 blocks in the distance, the ever-present, seemingly never-ending smoke. The smoke from fires where the World Trade Center used to be. Fires that resisted more than 12 hours of pelting rain, which looked just as fierce and portend just as badly for the chance of any more survivors as they did on Tuesday afternoon. Live in Midtown Manhattan, Keith Olbermann, KFWB News 980.
KFWB News Time 4:47. We're sorry. KFWB's Keith Olbermann says that is what publishers of the New York Times are telling their readers today.
In an unprecedented gesture, today's New York Times carries a front-page apology, an acknowledgement that some of the thick Sunday paper was printed before the terrorist attack, quote, and that the tone of some articles and advertising is inconsistent with the gravity of the news. The lead piece in the Sunday magazine is headlined, "In the Rubble of Silicon Valley." Suburban railroad executives are still taking heat today for having ordered posters depicting people missing at the Trade Center taken down at Grand Central Station for aesthetic reasons. What is this? A policeman asks a reporter. The Louvre? Another cop shakes his head as he looks from Canal Street towards the urban volcano 5 blocks to the south. His regular beat is the Upper West Side, and there on Wednesday, he says, when the winds changed and began to blow north from downtown, a caller complained that his apartment smelled of smoke. And what were they going to do about it? Warning, the winds are changing again right now, again to head north. In Midtown Manhattan, Keith Olbermann, KFWB News 980.
Keith Olbermann. Keith?
At the intersection intersection of Nassau and Liberty Streets, the claustrophobic canyons of Wall Street surrender its only view of the wreckage and unfold 6 days ago in these minutes. The familiar striated metal fascias of the towers are visible from there. A 3-story piece, jagged and burnt, sticks out of the ground where it hit when the towers collapsed. You can see it if and when a gust of wind clears away some of the acrid, hot, fresh smoke from the volcano that is 2 blocks to the west. Already the titans and the minions of Wall Street have seen the groups of 2 to 10 soldiers at every corner, the police cars snaking through the dust-covered streets. Now, a block closer to the exchange, foot traffic narrows towards barricades. You got something that shows you work here? A policeman, all business, asks firmly yet politely, and then he coughs. And you notice all the other cops and the soldiers and the Red Cross workers are wearing masks. It all began exactly 6 days ago. No one here can guess when it will end. Live on Wall Street, Keith Olbermann, KFWB News 980.
So to give us a little perspective, KFWB's Keith Olbermann has ventured out onto the Brooklyn Bridge and joins us with this live report.
A military Humvee backs out onto Wall Street, maneuvering as it does between an electrical company truck and 2 trailer-sized portable generators. Heads shaking, eyes closed or red, covering their coughing mouths with a mask, a paper towel, a bandana, a handkerchief, a men's sock, even in one case an American flag. Wall Streeters herded into narrow Nassau Street, went back to work on foot against a backdrop unlike that which they left in panic last Tuesday. Most seem to want to avoid the specter 2 blocks to their right, the ghostly and still smoking hulk of the Trade Center. A 7-story tall slice of its facade, twisted like so much iron grating, beckoning almost irresistibly at the intersection of Liberty Street. Finally, there is this sound behind me now, or actually lack of sound. The Brooklyn Bridge, closed to all but emergency traffic and providing another new view of the new New York skyline and the great gap that now defines it. Live on the Brooklyn Bridge overlooking Wall Street, Keith Olbermann, KFWB News 980.
KFWB News Time, 1:37.
One eye to the window in Lower Manhattan today, where workers are trying to get back to work, but you can imagine they're also wondering if they'll see another plane coming right at them. KFWB's Keith Olbermann gives us the view, not far from Ground Zero.
The reopening of all but the streets directly around the Trade Center has provided the most horrifying view yet, one that few New Yorkers have seen, and perhaps it's better that way. Here at one of the city's oldest intersections, Greenwich and Rector, is the backside angle from the south of what may be the central fire, rising from a depression in a 3-story pile of twisted metal. Orange, black, yellow, the smoke angry and acrid, dirty brown at its origin. And behind it, part of the complex, the outside structure pulled away. The shapes of individual rooms still visible. The floors buckled by the heat with that telltale sagging, so evident at the Murrah building in Oklahoma City. And everywhere, despite the heroic attempts to clean up, the volcanic-like ash on windows, on the street itself, on mailboxes, and 4th floor fire escapes. On them, some kind of canvas strewn in small pieces, possibly an awning that went up when the towers came down. At the intersection of Greenwich and Rector Streets in downtown Manhattan, Keith Olbermann, KFWB News 980. The President of the United States in an open-air sports stadium in the middle of a terrorist alert. President Bush's arrival here at a little after 4:30 Pacific precipitated unprecedented security, even for the World Series, even for New York. Everyone entering this stadium passed through a metal detector, and many got the wand treatment. Some area streets were blocked by salt shredding trucks filled with sand. Elevators in the building were turned off, and at one point a lockdown was declared, freezing the media and many fans where they were till the president got where he was going. It is not all the grim new reality, however. At one metal detector at the right field gate, a couple was wanded by a security guard, and then they asked him to take a photo of them. He obliged. At Yankee Stadium in New York, Keith Olbermann, KFWB News 980.
KFWB News Time, 7:37.
With a letter from New York, I'm Keith Olbermann. Imagine if the Trade Center attacks had happened in L.A., and if Dodger Stadium was literally across the street from the UCLA Tennis Center, and if down the road from both of them was LAX. That was the backdrop against which professional sports returned to New York today. in the first regular season game since the 10th. The Mets hosted the Atlanta Braves at Shea Stadium, a location traditionally so much a part of LaGuardia Airport's flight path that on a long Sunday afternoon here, 100 planes might fly directly overhead. On a good day, many fans, many players were apprehensive. There have been no good days lately, so the FAA has agreed to keep aircraft away from Shea during the games. Security is tighter, the mood more somber. On the other hand, in a gesture not seen in baseball since the Second World War, the entire Mets team is donating its collective salary, about $450,000, to the fund for the widows of children of New York policemen and firemen. Most poignant of all, for 40 seasons, the New York skyline has been part of the Mets logo. Tonight, its silhouette still stands atop the scoreboard, looming behind right field. And on its miniature version of the World Trade Center's Twin Towers has been placed the red, white, and blue memorial ribbon. At Shea Stadium, with a letter from New York, Keith Olbermann, KFWB News 980. With a letter from New York, I'm Keith Olbermann. Carlo Lafredo and David Laub plan to be back in Southern California tomorrow. But first, there are all these funerals. Lafredo and Laub are two L.A. County firefighters I met on the subway, coming back from the Mets game. They've been here since a week ago yesterday at the World Trade Center. When I left them, they weren't certain if they'd be going back to Ground Zero for an overnight shift or if they wouldn't be needed till morning. They were hoping for the former. Work all night and then go to funerals all day. Sounds macabre. But one fact about life here now that will creep up on you and then overwhelm you is this. With 346 New York firefighters lost, their funerals can be lonely events. A man might have died and had his 10 best friends die with him. So Carlo Lafredo and David Laub go in their place. We'll go pick up grandma, or we'll get the groceries. All the errands people are in too much pain to do, David says. They are strangers, yet they are accepted immediately as family. We're all firefighters, says Carlo. Worst experience of our lives, David adds, and the best. Does that make any sense? A letter from New York. Keith Olbermann, KFWB News 980. With a letter from New York, I'm Keith Olbermann. Memorials and funerals for 6 more firefighters were held this morning and this afternoon. And on the eastern side of Central Park, under a white tent and a persistent drizzle, the 700 lost employees of the Cantor Fitzgerald bond firm were remembered in a gathering of family and friends. Those lost from the staff of the restaurant atop the World Trade Center, Windows on the World, were eulogized in late afternoon. This is now the city of mourning. 3 weeks after, and it is still papered with photographs of the missing. The first shrine at Union Square is still filled with them, so too part of the Times Square subway station, and streetlights, and hospitals, and construction sites, and boarded-up storefronts just blocks from the Trade Center itself. As a move to collect and preserve them in a city museum suggests, these missing posters continue to resonate in an almost unspeakable way. It is the rare and fortunate New Yorker who is not halted in the streets by one of them. You do not have to know any of the men and women depicted to feel the pain, but when you do, there is shock upon shock. On Canal Street today, a black and white photograph of one of those Cantor Fitzgerald employees, a smiling man named Mike Tanner. I went to college with him. A letter from New York, Keith Olbermann, KFWB News 980. With a letter from New York, I'm Keith Olbermann. 3 weeks ago today, we reported to you from the first sign of crassness from the recovering city. Executives of Metro North, the commuter rail provider, had ordered that posters depicting the missing be removed from Grand Central Station for aesthetic reasons. Today, just off the main room of that station, passengers stop in front of a 12-paneled screen placed there by the railroad's employees. There are perhaps 300 missing posters there, 4 of them depicting John Thomas Andreacchio. On each of them, next to the smile peeking out from under Mr. Andreaccio's mustache, has been handwritten the word found. On Thursday, he was added to the list of the dead. Another update. The New York Police and Fire Widows and Children's Benefit Fund, the charity to which the fees from these reports are going, has in the last 26 days raised about $20 million. Its founder, the former baseball star Rusty Staub, is grateful and overwhelmed. The stark reality, however, is that even with this extraordinary generosity, if the fund were to divide the new donations just among those families newly afflicted, each would receive about $49,000. Their website is www.nypfwc.org. A letter from New York, Keith Olbermann, KFWB News 980.
Just for the record, since we can discuss now what people did that was gracious and what people did that was not gracious, The contract I had with Fox, which they were trying to get me to quit or do something so they could fire me and not have to pay me $100,000 a month to just sit there, provided that if I did any freelance work anywhere else, that money would be deducted from what Fox owed me. So if I did a piece for CNN, and I went to work for them after 9/11 as well, I actually once had to go in and they said, we'll give you $1,000 an appearance. And I said, no, I can't accept that. Well, maybe we can get you $1,250. I said, no, less. And they said, less? And I explained to them about Fox. I said, I've got to do it for $400 an appearance, not $1,000. And they said, the least we could possibly give you is $500. And I went, all right, fine. I had to negotiate down. The KFW appearances, I believe, were worth $31 each, according to the SAG-AFTRA agreement for radio pieces. The money went to charity, to a 9/11 charity. And yes, Fox deducted it from the money they sent me. Just so we know where everybody's priorities were after 9/11. Okay, I've done all the damage I can do here. Thank you for listening. We're now back to 5 episodes a week, posting nightly just after midnight Eastern. Once again, there is a Monday countdown. Don't forget the one tonight after the debate, about 10:30 Eastern p.m. Brian Ray and John Philip Chanel, the musical directors of the program, arranged, produced, and performed most of Countdown's music. Mr. Chanel handled orchestration and keyboards. Mr. Ray was on guitars, bass, and drums, and it was produced by TKO Brothers. Our satirical and pithy musical comments are by the best baseball stadium organist ever, Nancy Faust. The other music, the sports, is the Olbermann theme from ESPN2, written by Mitch Warren Davis, courtesy of ESPN Inc., and some others, including some Beethoven, was arranged and performed by the group No Horns Allowed. My announcer today was my friend Kenny Mayne. Everything else was pretty much my fault. That's Countdown for this, the 57th day until the 2024 presidential election, the 1,337th day since convicted felon Dementia J. Trump's first attempted coup against the democratically elected government of the United States. Use the mental health system. Use presidential immunity. The Supreme Theocratic Court gave it to you, President Biden. It's your last option after the bravery of Juan Merchan. I say if it's official, it's legal. So do whatever you want to him. The next scheduled countdown is live tonight around 10:30 p.m. Eastern on YouTube after the Harris-Trump debate. Bulletins as the news requires. Till the next time, I'm Keith Olbermann. Good morning, good afternoon, good night, and good luck.